Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly Torah portion, our class on the Torah reading. So this week, the Torah reading is Chaye, which we know as all the portions get their name because of some word or that appears in the beginning of the portion, and we name it for that. So, for example, in this week's portion, it starts, Vayihiyu Chaye Sarah. These were the days of the life of Sarah, 127. She lived 127 years. But as always, in Torah, nothing is just because there happens to be this word in the beginning of the portion, so the whole portion receives a certain name. A name in Torah and in Jewish life is a big deal. We know that names of people are a big deal. Names of holidays are a big deal. And without a doubt, the names of the portions are also a big deal. And the name is, of course, representative of the whole theme of the parsha. So if that's the case, there's a question that rises immediately. If the name Chaye Sarah means the life of Sarah, and when you look into read the parsha, every single aspect of this parsha's theme is the death of Sarah. Why do I say that? So let's talk about the three main themes or stories of this portion. The first portion talks about, as you can see in the first page of the handout, Sarah's death and the purchase of her burial site. There could be nothing more opposite of the life of Sarah than this topic. It's all about her burial. She died and she's buried. Where was she buried, by the way? She was, of course, buried in Hebron, in the cave of the patriarchs. And Avram comes there, negotiates with the Hittites. They were the ones that were living at that time in this location, in the locale of Hebron. And he negotiates with the Hittites, and they want to first grant it to him as a gift. And he says, no, I don't want a gift, I want to pay for it. And he ends up paying for it 400 silver shekels to a man by the name of Ephron, who was a chieftain was a chief in the city council, and he sells Abraham this site. And that became the famous Marat HaMachpelah, the cave of the patriarchs. If you ever went to Hebron, anyone over here been to Hebron? Raise your hand. Anyone? Not that many people go to Hebron, but I want to encourage you, the next time you go to Israel, you should go to Hebron. It's a very, very special place to be. When I was there last time, maybe not the last time, I was there many times, but one of the times I was there, I got a tour from one of the local Jews that live in Hebron, and he took me, this is what they said, I don't have any evidence for this, but he took me to the place. They have some archaeological findings there, and he took me to the place, and he told me, this is where the negotiations happened. And they have signs, the negotiation with Ephron and the purchase of the cave. I'm a bit skeptical about that, but nonetheless, there is a site there that you can see that they have some reason to believe that was where Abraham negotiated with Ephron to buy the site. But anyway, that's the first theme of this portion. So obviously, the death of Sarah and the burial of Sarah, there could be nothing further, more opposite than the theme of the name of the parsha, which is the life of Sarah. This is the very opposite of her life. The next topic, the next story of this parsha, turn your page. I'm going to read a few verses. On the bottom, chapter 24 of Genesis. Now Abraham was old, well in his years, and Hashem had blessed Avram with everything. Rashi tells us what's everything with a son. He has a son. Now every father knows when you have a son of age, what do you got to do? You got to find the shidduch for him. You got to marry him off. So Abraham said to his servant, the elder of his household, who controls all that is his. This is the famous Eliezer, the servant of Abraham. He said to him, place now your hand under my thigh, and I will have you swear by Hashem, God of heaven and God of the earth, that you not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. Rather, to my land and to my kindred shall you go and take a wife for my son, for Isaac. In other words, Abraham is instructing his servant, the Shatchen, right, the matchmaker, to go find a wife for Abraham from his family, not from the people, not the Canaanites. He doesn't want to marry him off to them. And he tells him, this is your job now, okay? And a big part of the portion tells the story of this, how he went, and he made certain signs with God, he prayed to God, and how he found the Rivka, and a whole long story which is beautiful, full of miracles and divine providence and all kinds of things that happened with this Eliezer in the pursuit to find Yitzchak a wife. And at the end, I'm not going to read the whole thing, of course, we'll just turn the page. After the whole story, and he finds Rivka, who happens to be a family member of Avraham, of course. And he now comes back with Rivka back to Israel. The Torah says, Isaac, and this is on page 121, you see it? Chapter 24, verse 63. Isaac went out to supplicate, to daven in the field, towards evening, and he raised his eyes and saw, and behold, camels were coming. And Rebekah raised her eyes and saw Isaac. She inclined while upon the camel. And she said to the servant Eliezer, who is the man walking in the field towards me? And the servant Eliezer said, he is my master. She then took the veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that they had done, how he found her, and the whole miracle. And Isaac brought her, meaning Rebekah, into the tent of Sarah, of his mother, the same tent that Sarah had lived. He brought now Rivka into that tent, Sarah's mother. He married Rebekah, and now look at these next words. She became his wife, and he loved her, and thus was Isaac consoled after his mother. Hey, what does that tell you? So here too, the marriage of Yitzchak is a nice thing, a very wonderful thing, as it should happen to every one of us. But what happens? He marries her, and that brings him consolation and comfort for the death of his mother. In other words, he's moving on. Sarah died. He's been very depressed about it, or not depressed, but very sad. And now Rivka is brought into his life, and he's now comforted. He's no more, the sadness is gone. He's happy, and he's moving on beyond his mother Sarah. In other words, again, this story of the marriage, the theme of it, the idea behind it is that this is a move away from Sarah, the opposite of the life of Sarah. Sarah dies, and he's not even anymore thinking about her so much in terms of the sadness. It's like when a person, after the year, the mourning is over, and you're moving on. So it's the opposite of the life of Sarah. It's the epitome of her death. That means that she's now dead, meaning she's passed on, and Yitzchak has moved on, and it's a new chapter in his life, away from Sarah's life. So again, the second story is also, of this portion, also is the very opposite of the name of the portion. The name of the portion is Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. And here again, the next story of the marriage of Yitzchak, and how that allowed him to move on from the sadness of his mother's death and put it to rest, so to say. And as a new chapter in his life, is the very opposite of his mother's life. It emphasizes that not only has she died, but he has moved on and is comforted now by someone else.
How long between, sorry, Rabbi? How long between the death of her?
Right away.
Right away?
Right? No. So it says 3 years later. He married her when she was 3 years old. She was born when Sarah died, the girl, meaning Rivka, and he waited a few years, then he married her. He married her as a young age. She was only 3 years old when he married her. Yeah.
3 years old?
Yeah, she was 3 years old.
Because he took her into the tent.
Right.
It said when she was 3.
Yeah, that's when she was brought
Like
in.
he consummated the
No.
I mean,
He waited for 10 years. Yeah, that's what Rashi tells us. That he didn't consummate the marriage till she was 13. Yeah, that was normal back then. Those were the norms,
But she
but
was
I thought two things. I thought very much like it was weird how they wrote that he married her, then she was his wife, and then he loved her.
very good question. That's a little diversion, but if you asked, I will say, what's your question? You should love before you marry, right? Is that your question?
Love meant that they consummated that.
No, he loved her means that he very attached to her, like you love someone. Not cute. I mean, it was more than cute spiritually also. She was beautiful in every way, and he was very much, he saw the greatness of this woman. So I'll tell you an interesting thing. Why is he? It says over here that he brought her into the tent. It's a good detail. It's a good. Thank you for asking. Let's read this again. And Isaac brought her into the tent. In Hebrew, it reads a little different. And Rashi tells us that the Hebrew wording seemed to indicate that when he brought her into the tent, he saw suddenly that she is Sarah. She's like Sarah. Why? Because in Sarah's tent was a very special, miraculous things happened over there. It says that the Shabbos candle, she lit Shabbos candles, and the candle burnt the whole week, from Friday to Friday. It never went out. And when his mother died, and he started lighting Shabbos candles, I guess, it didn't have that miracle. It went burnt out after a few days, a few hours, I mean. And then Rivka comes in, and the first Shabbos, she lights Shabbos candles on Friday afternoon, and boom, the candle is burning a whole week, just like, and she was 3 years old, yeah. The Rebbe has from this a whole thing that even a 3-year-old should light Shabbos candles, anyway. So, one second. Then there was the other great miracles. That there was the challah that she baked was very, very. It says that the food stayed in the satiated the person that ate it for a very long time. So he saw all these miracles come back when she married her, and so that's why he loved her. I guess that's why he loved her. Yeah,
and we can understand
for many reasons.
People were much bigger at the time. If she was 3 years old and she was
Carrying jugs of water, yeah.
That's the question.
That makes no sense. I mean, it doesn't say anywhere that she's 3 years old. I mean, that's just
It doesn't say that she's 3 years old, but when you look at all the years, when you start calculating the other, you can.
to carry jugs, to carry on a conversation. I mean, it makes no sense.
It wasn't a regular 3-year-old, but the Torah does say that she was, based on when you calculate when you do the chronological calculations, if she was 20, she was this age when she had him, and she died when Yitzchak was this. So you can calculate by extrapolation how old she was. Let's not get into that conversation now, because it's a separate topic. But you asked, I wanted to point out. So anyway, again, this marriage of Yitzchak seems to bring closure to Sarah. Again, the very opposite of the name of the Parsha, which is her life, not her death. This seems to be emphasizing, again, the closure of Sarah, which is the epitome of her death. And then comes the third and final topic of this portion. And again, that's in chapter 25 on the same page. After Yitzchak gets married, Avram is all alone. His son moved out, and he's a widower, living alone. So he's also not happy. So what does he do? Abraham proceeded and took a wife whose name was Keturah. He remarried. She bore him Zimran, a bunch of kids. Who was this Keturah? So Rashi tells us this was based on the Midrash and certain proofs. This was none other than Hagar, his prior wife who he kicked out of the house many years earlier. Yes, that's who it was. He married Hagar again, yeah. So Rashi tells us because she became a very special woman, And the word keturah means like ketoret, like the incense, and her fragrance, her spiritual fragrance was so good, she became like the Torahs that they offered in the temple. She became so special, and she was so pleasing before God that she became a righteous woman.
So she converted?
Well, for sure, yeah. So again, what does that tell you? That's the life of Sarah. That's the very opposite of the life of Sarah. She died and he's marrying someone else. It's again, even he is now, moving on and finding closure. Got it? Now, this is even more, this emphasizes the idea even more. I want you to turn 2 pages. I want you to turn 2 pages to page 73. Not 73, sorry. 97, the last page of this booklet. I want to emphasize something. The last page of this handout. You remember last week we learned about the birth of Yishmael, or 2 weeks ago? Last week we learned about the birth of Yitzchak. No, 2 weeks ago we learned about the birth of Yishmael, about the birth of Yitzchak. And once Yitzchak was born, so Yitzchak and Yishmael were all growing up in the same house. Avram has a wife, Hagar, and Sarah, 2 wives, and 2 children. Yishmael from Hagar and Yitzchak from Sarah. And then problems began. Let's read. On top of the page. Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. He was making fun of Yitzchak. So she said to Abraham, drive out this slave woman and with her son. For the son of that slave woman shall not inherit with my son, with Isaac. In other words, during Sarah's life, Abraham was told by his wife to do what? To kick this woman out of the house. And he was very distressed over it. And God tells him, listen to her. And he does that. He removes Hagar and Yishmael, her son, from the house. Now Sarah dies, so what does he go and do? Hello, he sends a letter, you can come back. That's her life or that's her death? That represents, is that thematic of her life of Sarah or the death of Sarah? I would think that also represents the fact that she's gone, and he's going now and fetching her back from Egypt. You can come and be my wife again, and Sarah is not a disturbance anymore. And again, this is the last story of the portion, the third and final story of the portion, which again represents the very opposite of the name of the portion. So we got 3 themes in this portion, each and every one of them. That's the whole portion, by the way. Those are the 3 topics of the portion. There's nothing else. And each and every one of them represents the very opposite of her life. The death of Sarah, the closure after her death, the remarriage after her death. And to bring back the woman who during her lifetime had her expelled, and Avram now brings her back. Yes, she did tshuva, I get that. But it certainly represents not the life of Sarah, the death of Sarah. So this is the obvious question that comes to mind when we read the name of the portion and the theme, which are so opposite one another.
Well, that Keturah bothered Sarah a lot because Sarah couldn't have kids. So in a way, Agar was able to.
So the reason that the Torah says that she kicked her out because he was the man, and we'll get to it as to the reasoning. We'll talk about it soon. We're getting there.
But didn't Sarah tell him to go to Hagar to have a child?
She did, yes, she did.
And all
But then Hagar started, flexing her muscles,
these children, the second time round, he sends away.
Yeah, he sends them away. Yeah.
Still kind of listening to Sarah, even though.
Well, for different reasons. We'll see. We'll get to that. We're going to get to all of that. So let me try to answer this question and share with you an insight that the Rebbe has shared with us many years ago. And that's how he explains how these 3 topics of the portion indeed represent Sarah's life. How so? So he explained. First of all, what's life? What's life? Breathing, your heart's pumping. Yeah, in a way, that's a definition of life. A person who's talking and walking and breathing is not dead, he's alive. But what's real life? The Gemara says, the Talmud says, Yaakov Avinu lo mes. Yaakov did not die. Yaakov didn't die. So the Gemara right away asked, what do you mean he didn't die? They had a burial, they embalmed him, they buried him, there was a funeral. What do you mean he didn't die? So the Talmud answers that his sons, his children, his seed is alive, so he's alive. Okay, that's a nice answer, but what does that mean? When people die, their seed is still alive. So is everyone alive? So obviously life is not just breathing in air and your lungs are able to breathe and your heart's ticking and your brain is thinking. Life is holiness, is godliness. It says who's the real source of life? It says, Kim Chaim, God is alive. God is the living God. So if you're in touch with God, you're alive. If you're not in touch with God, you're not alive. The same Talmud tells us that the Rishoyim, the evil people, while they're still alive, that means they're walking, talking, and eating, they're considered dead because they're not in touch with God. When you're in touch with God, so one of those, real life is the life of godliness, of spirituality, of holiness. When you're raising a family and they're connected to Hashem, and then you die physically and they're still connected, you instilled in them values, and that continues into your children, to your grandchildren, so you're alive as well. So life becomes an eternal thing. So the same thing with Sarah. Her life doesn't end when she dies. If her theme of life continues on after her, she can be considered alive. And here the Rebbe explains how the three stories of this portion represent the themes, the three themes, or the one theme of Sarah. Everything she lived for was manifest in the three stories of this portion. Let's see. What was Sarah's, which shall you say, her signature idea? Huh? One of them, that was one of them. But I'd say that was together with Avram. But as an individual, where did she stand out? So let me, Motherhood? Yes, but there was a lot of mothers besides her. But you're right. I'm going to point out and I'll show you what I mean by motherhood. I want to read with you one more reading, okay? And this is the second to the last page. Hold on. The second to the last page, page 73. So this is the end of the portion of Lech Lecha. God appears to Abraham when he's 99 years old. And he basically tells him, I want you to circumcise yourself, right? You remember that, right? That story. So let's read this together with where I made an arrow. Verse 3 of chapter 17. God appears to him, and Abraham threw himself upon his face, and God spoke with him, saying, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be a father of a multitude of nations. God tells Abraham that I'm changing your name. Look what he says further. For I made you a father of a multitude of nations. I will make you most exceedingly fruitful, and make nations of you, and kings shall descend from you. I will ratify my covenant between me and you, and between your offspring and offspring after you, throughout their generations, as an everlasting covenant, to be a God to you and to your offsprings after you. And I will give you, wait a minute, did I make the wrong copy here? I think I did. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line on the top. Verse 3 again, let's do this again. I knew I skipped something. Abraham threw himself upon his face, and God spoke with him, saying, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be a father of a multitude of nations. And here comes the kicker. Your name shall no longer be called Avram, but your name shall be Avraham. For I have made you a father of a multitude of nations. Okay, enough. In other words, God tells Abraham, your name is not only going to be Avram, it's going to be Abraham. What does the extra hey represent? The extra hey represents the fact that he is in Hebrew Av Hamoin Goyim. He's not just a father of one nation, the Jewish people. He's the father of many nations, of the Yishmaelites, and then of the Esav nation, the Edomites. Many nations come from Abraham. That's what Abraham represents. But how about, and the truth is, he was the father of not only Yitzchak, he was the father of Yishmael. In fact, he was the father of Yishmael before he was the father of Yitzchak. In other words, he's the father not just of the Jewish people, he's the father of all people, many peoples. How about Sarah? Sarah is the mother of how many nations? One. Sarah is the mother of Yitzchak. That's it. 1 second, hold on, we'll get there. And not only is this a fact of who they gave birth to, but that became also their whole modus operandi. That's what they dedicated their life to. Avram, what was he busy with? We learned it throughout the portions that we learned till now, yet last week and the week before. Avram was had great hospitality, and when people came to his doorstep, and he fed them, and he gave them a place to sleep, and they would go then on their way, the Torah tells us that he asked them, that when they would thank him for his hospitality and all that, they would bless him. He said, no, don't bless me, bless God. He's the source of everything. And he would begin conversations with people and teach them about monotheism. And he began the movement, the first one, to teach about God to all the peoples of the world. And he had a great success. He was very, very effective. And he saw it as his mission, as the father of multitude of nations, to teach all the world about God. And that's what he spent his whole life doing. That's basically what Avram did his whole life. He taught people about God, not just Jews, but all peoples. That became his life's mission. What became Sarah's life's mission? The protection of Yitzchak. Her life's mission was to make sure. So if Avram is trying to bring godliness to all peoples, Sarah is making sure that godliness God and the message of God should primarily be transferred or directed or, taught to the Jewish people, to Yitzchak, and from Yitzchak to Yaakov, and so on. It should move on it should stay within the realm of holiness. And the minute she saw a negative influence on Yitzchak, which is what we read before, that she saw that Yishmael began to mock and to say, I'm the inheritor, I'm the real heir of Avram. And that was what that battle was. Yishmael was saying, I'm the son of Abraham, I'm the first son of Abraham. So I'm really his continuation. I carry the torch of Abraham forward. Yitzchak is the second son. Now, we all know in the Torah there's such a thing called as a becher, a firstborn, which gets double portion of his parents, of his father. So Yishmael began to demand that. And not only that, but he was saying the real son, or the one that will carry the Abrahamic, which is the Jewish people, is me, Yishmael, not Yitzchak. And the minute Sarah saw that, she removed him from the home. She didn't just punish him or reprimand him. She said, he's out. And although we read before that Avram was very distressed over this, it says that he was very distressed about having to send away his son and have an argument with his wife over this. To the point where he consulted God, should I do this? And what does God tell him? Why was Avram distressed? Because again, he's the Av Hamoin Goyim. He's the father of many nations. He has to take it that Yishmael should know about God and his descendants, all the Arabs and all. But God tells him, everything Sarah tells you to do, you should do. Listen to her. She knows better in this. And that's what he does. He removes them from the house, as we mentioned earlier. So he moves them from the house, right? In other words, what do we see from here? That if Avram's life's mission is to bring holiness to everyone, Sarah's life's mission is to zero in on the Jewish people. Her life was dedicated to making sure that Avram's, his everything he represented, the covenant that God promised Abraham by the circumcision, all that should go to her son, to the Jewish people, and no one else. Because the Jewish people are in Sarah's eyes are infinitely greater than everyone else, and they are the ones that have to carry the torch of godliness to the whole world, but it has to be through them. Now, in other words, in her mind, she said to Avram, you have two sons, Yishmael and Yitzchak. They're not equal, is what she was telling Avram. They're not equal. God told you, Yitzchak yikarei lecha zara. It's through Yitzchak that your seed will shine. In other words, Yishmael is incomparable to Yitzchak. And she fought for this idea. Now let's see if she was successful. Well, we know that during her lifetime she was successful. She removed him from the house, and he left with his mother. So that battle she won. But let's see how this all manifested itself once she's out of the picture physically. She's no longer around. Let's take one portion after the next. There's three stories in this portion, right? The first one is what? The burial place of Sarah. Sarah is buried in the cave of Machpelah. Why was Abraham so interested in that cave specifically? There's a lot of places to bury people. Why there? What's the big deal? If you ever been to Hebron, it's not exactly a Mount Everest. It's not exactly a nice scenic, it's in the rocky terrain. It's not a very, why there? What was the specialty of that cave? He wants that cave specifically, and he fetches out this Ephron, and he wants that. Get me him, I need that cave. What's the cave? What was the big deal of that cave? Our sages tell us, because there were two people buried there already from before. You know who? Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were buried there. They were buried in the cave of Machpelah. Now, if Adam and Eve are buried in the cave of Machpelah, one would think Adam and Eve are the father of who? And father and mother of all mankind. So the cave of Machpelah, you would think, would be a place that belongs to all peoples, not specifically the Jewish people. It has a connection to everyone. But what does Avram do? He goes and negotiates to bury Sarah in that cave. So in these three stories, I'm going to build one on top of the other. In the first story, we're going to see how Sarah's life's mission, that her Jewish child Yitzchak is infinitely greater. It's greater than general peoples in general. Then we're going to zero in, even he's greater, infinitely greater than even people that were directly connected to Avram. And he was even infinitely greater even from Avram's own children. And now we'll go through the three stories. The cave of Machpelah is connected to all peoples, as we just said. The first two people were buried there. So you would think that, logically, anyone that has a few dollars and has a certain feeling for these two great, the first two human beings, we all come from them, would want to have a burial spot there. It could have gone to anyone. Everyone is connected to Adam and Eve. But Avram insisted on behalf of Sarah, no, Sarah will be born there. This cave, in other words, even Adam and Eve, even though they're the father of all peoples, who's the real descendants of Adam and Eve, the purpose for creation? Bereshis, what did the Torah tell us? Right in the first pasuk, in the first verse, God created the world for two purposes, the Jewish people and the Torah. In other words, Adam and Eve are the father of all peoples. But what's the real purpose of their creation was to produce the Jewish people. And this is where we see the first story of Chaye Sarah, where her life's mission is beginning to be manifested even after her death. The first story, immediately after she's dead, where are we burying her? She's going to be buried with Adam and Chava. No one else. It's going to be, this cave is going to become now the first Jewish piece of property in the land of Israel that is owned by the Jewish people. What's the next story? In other words, her idea, everything she fought for, that it's Yitzchak, not Yishmael. It's Yitzchak, not anyone else. The Jewish people are the purpose. What God wants them to be the light unto the nation. They're not like everyone else. And the first action after she's dead, Avram takes and makes that first statement by the purchase of this cave where Adam and Chava, the first two people, who you would think is the father of all peoples. No. That are mainly the father of Abraham and Isaac, Abraham and Sarah, the Jewish people. And that's why the Jewish patriarchs are buried near them. Sarah's idea. What's the second one? Second one is Yitzchak's marriage. So I'll fill you in some of the blanks of that marriage. What happened over there? Avram calls his son, his servant Eliezer. Now Eliezer was deeply attached to Avram. The sages tell us that Eliezer was a man that has dedicated his life to teach Avram's teachings to everyone that would listen. He became his mouthpiece. He taught whatever he heard from Abraham, he would teach to everyone else. He was a very big follower and a dedicated chassid, right? A dedicated follower of Avram. But when it came to the shidduch of his son Yitzchak, what does Avram tell him? Tell him, go to my family and marry him off. Don't marry him off to the Canaanites. Now it says in the Medrash it says over here that Eliezer asked Avram, what happens if they don't want to send their daughter and they're not willing to marry her, And then there he hinted to Avram the following. He says, I have a daughter. If it doesn't work out with the family, I always have a nice daughter. She's, right there. And then maybe that's a good shidduch if the other, what you want doesn't work out. He hinted to Avram, if that doesn't work out, maybe, my daughter's coming of age. She's 18, 19 years old. She just finished seminary. She's back home. We can marry her off. And what does Avram tell him? Not going to happen. You're not Jewish. This is not going to happen. You come from the Canaanites. At the end of the day, you're cursed. From Noach cursed you. You're cursed. Yitzchak is blessed. This is never going to happen. In other words, even the people that are very close, the close-knit people of Avram, you would think that, okay, they're already, such a big difference between Yitzchak and the closest people of Avram, the totally dedicated people. Sarah throughout her life fought that there should never be a confusion about this. That this Yitzchak is the heir of Avram. He's on a whole different wavelength. He's infinitely greater than everyone else. There's no comparison between him as the father of the Jewish people, the firstborn Jew, and everyone else, even the people closest to Avram. And what does Avram tell Eliezer? He's going to only marry from the family. He cannot marry you. And as you're a wonderful person, you're a dedicated follower, you're my teacher, you're teaching everything to everyone else, but it comes to marriage, Sarah had it right. Sarah had it right. His son Yitzchak is on the pedestal. It's a different ballgame. It's a different world. So again, you're seeing in the marriage of this young man to Rivka, or to whoever it was going to be, even before they knew who he was going to marry, he already laid down the lines. He drew the line in the sand. Yitzchak is Yitzchak, and that's it. There's no one's getting close to him in terms of a marriage to mix if it's not the right person, not the right person. No matter how good you are, you're still not Yitzchak. And that was exactly what Sarah's theme of her life was. To emphasize that, if you're going to start talking about inheritance, getting into the family, marriage, you're out. There's only one Yitzchak. And the third story of this portion is what? The end of the parsha we read, and we'll read it again, that Yitzchak, you want to read it together? It's the third to the bottom, where is it? Page 121. It's a very short, a few verses. We'll read it together, and we'll see how this once again stands as a testament to Sarah's whole entire life's mission. That Yitzchak is it and no one else. Till now, we learned that Yitzchak, as the father of the Jewish people, took over the Machpelah. In comparison to other nations, it was him. Sarah was buried there. Even in comparison to the closest people, this close circle of Avram, Yitzchak stands out, right? Exactly as Sarah said. Now we're going to read that even among Avram's own children, there was no comparison. Let's read it. Avram proceeded and took a wife whose name was this chapter 25. Took a wife whose name was Keturah. We read this. And suddenly she bore him a bunch of kids. She bore him Zimron, Yokshan, Midan, Midyan, Ishbak, and Shua. 6 kids. Yokshan begot Sheba and Dedan. Okay, it goes through a few generations here. The children of Dedan were Ashurim, Letushim, and Luumim. And the children of Midian, Ephah and Ephar, Chanoch, Abida, and Aldah. All these were the descendants of Keturah. Now, what did Avram do? So he's got Yitzchak, and he's got Yishmael and his 6 brothers, right? They were full brothers, these 6, right? They weren't half brothers, because they shared the same father and the same mother. What does Avram do? You would think, okay, he has 6, 7, 8 kids now, right? He's got 8 children. Yishmael and another 6 from Hagar, and 1 from Sarah. Okay, father of many children. You show them some Friday night, you sit them all at the table, and, we're a happy family. We're all equal. But look what he does. Avram gave all that he had to Isaac. But to the concubine children, first of all, how does the Torah refer to them? They're not, Hagar was never seen as a bona fide wife. She was considered a concubine. You know what a concubine is? Okay. But to the concubine children, who were Abraham's, Abraham gave gifts. He gave them gifts. Then he sent them away from Isaac his son, while he was still alive, eastward to the land of the east. He sends these 7 people, these 6 children, let's say, I don't know if Yishmael was part of them yet. He sends all these kids and grandsons off to the east, have a nice life. He gives them gifts and Zeigezund. In other words, and then he dies. Then the end of the portion is that he dies. And I want to read about his death. And with this, be the last reading. Let's read this a few more verses in. Now these are the days of the years of Avram's life, which he lived 100 years and 70 years and 5 years. He lived 175. And Abraham expired and died at a good old age, mature and content. And he was gathered to his people. Now listen to this next verse, how beautiful this is. His sons Isaac and Yishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, near Sarah. That's it. Now, if I'd like to just point out, the father dies, the children are coming to bury him. Now, he has 8 children, right? 6 of them he sent away to the east before he died. So they're not around when he dies. Who is around? Yishmael and Yitzchak. Now, when you have a family whose father died, the children come to the funeral. What happens? So you have the firstborn, secondborn, they're all, who takes charge in a certain way? The firstborn takes charge. Usually, he makes decisions, he consults, but he's like, people look up to him. He leads all the decision making of the funeral and all that. What happens over here? Who's mentioned first in this verse? Yitzchak and Yishmael. First Yitzchak, then Yishmael. And the sages tell us an interesting thing. That at the end of his life, Yishmael put Yitzchak ahead of him. It says that Yishmael did tshuva. He repented of his evil ways, of that argument that he was having with Yitzchak about the inheritance. And he was, I'm also the son, and I'm a first son, and who are you? And doing all that kind of shtick. But at the end of his life, he too realizes Yitzchak is Yitzchak. Yitzchak is the son of the wife. He's the son of the concubine, and mix out. Put Yitzchak ahead of you, and that's the way it is. So he does that too. The source of all the trouble comes around and gets it right at the end of his life. So what do we have over here? So first of all, we see that Avram himself is taking amongst his very children, his seed. Yitzchak is Yitzchak. There's no comparison. He sees them all as secondary children, meaning the sons of the concubine. He sends them away. He treats them well. He gives them gifts. He takes care of them. It says that he gave them all the money they needed. They would never have to worry again in their life. But Avram doesn't see himself as a private individual. He sees himself as the agent of Hashem for a future promise of a nation that's going to come to the world and be the light and teach the world about God and bring the Mashiach after thousands of years. In other words, he sees himself as, he sees all of history in front of him. What is he? He understands that this is happening through Yitzchak, not through Yishmael and the other boys. And he sends them off. And Yishmael, who stays behind, lives in Avram's house, also recognizes at the end of his own life, or at the end of Avram's life, he comes around to understand that Yitzchak, Sarah's call is the right one. That Yitzchak and the Jewish people are on a whole different level. So as it relates to the world at large, anyone could have bought the burial plot and be buried near their natural father and mother, which was Adam and Eve. Didn't happen. Sarah gets in there. This world was, even Adam and Eve, the real story of mankind is the Jewish people. The next story, marriage, close-knit people. Avram makes a big distinction. Draws a line in the sand and says there's Yitzchak and there's everyone else. And even among his own children, there's Yitzchak and there's everyone else. Now when you put all that together and you see it in that light, could we call this portion Chaye Sarah? The answer is a resounding yes. In fact, one can argue that it's after her death that she really starts living. Because everything she fought for is being manifested one after the other, after the next, exactly the way she saw it, and how and not how others have seen. Even Avram. Avram was distressed. You remember, we read that. He was distressed over the fact that he had to make this difference between Yitzchak and Yishmael. But God tells him, she's right. Listen to her. She knows what she's talking about. And her life's mission ends up being played out and revealed like even more when she's dead than when she's alive. And that's why this portion is called Chaye Sarah, because when a person dies and after his death or her death, everything she lived for suddenly even is manifest even more than when they were alive. You can truly call that person alive and well. And therefore this portion is called Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, because everything she lived for came to fruition and to revelation in full, and fully post her death. So although it's true they buried her, she's not alive physically. It's true that he found a wife and was comforted after her death, and he's kind of like moving on. And it's true that Avram takes another wife. But in every one of these stories, Sarah is so alive and so potent and so manifest that we call this portion Chaye Sarah. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please be my guest. Yeah.
Just a question, kind of unrelated, but related. But I've never been to the Ras Hamachpelah, but I think you were.
I was many times, yeah.
Do they think they know where the individual patriarchs and matriarchs are buried?
Okay, so it's a good, very interesting. I encourage you to go there when you're there next time. You'll see. So first of all, they have 3 burial rooms, one of Avram and Sarah, one of Yitzchak and Rivka, and one of Yaakov and Leah. I can't remember if there's one for Adam and Chava. It could be, I don't remember right now. But there's much more. In 1968, I believe it was, after the 6-Day War, when Hebron came back into the hands of the Jewish people, they wanted to go down and see what because they're not, it's a big building. You ever saw a picture of it? You saw a picture of it. It's one of the oldest buildings in the world, if I'm not mistaken. It's being built many times on top and higher, but that building is there for many, many years. Obviously, they're buried deep underground. They're not on the top levels over there, even though this tombstone is way up. It's not, obviously, if anything, it's 100 feet under where the tombstone is. But in 1968, and I have to remember this, I took pictures when I was there, the whole story. There was a little hole in the ground that was covered with metal. And they lowered down there. You couldn't get in there. You had to be very thin and they lowered down there a young girl, a 12-year-old girl. This was a whole operation. And I don't remember how far down they got, but they found some interesting things over there. So they have an idea where the area of the actual cave is. Although no one actually got in, that one can say, oh, this is the cave. But they went very far down. It's hard to know what exactly. But there's a whole story. You probably can find it online. Go home tonight, look online. The story of the cave of the Patriarch with the young girl that was lowered in there in 1968, I think it was. And it was against the government. The government was against it, of course. But whoever went in there did it in the middle of the night or whenever it was no one's. And they did a whole operation. It was a whole big deal. And I can't remember the details now. I believe even on my phone I have pictures of it, but we'll get there.
They have it marked like this is where Abraham.
Yeah, they have that marked. Yeah, they have that marked.
Sarah.
Yeah, for sure. I have that. Yeah, that you can see all different pictures. This is all Cave of Sarah means different rooms. It's a big building, the Cave of the Patriarchs. And interestingly.
There was another incident prior to that one.
Prior to what
They
one?
tried to go into it, and the rope broke.
The rope broke?
And the person that they sent in,
I don't remember hearing that. And died?
there was more into that.
Okay, I don't know. You can look that up and find out. The previous Rebbe was there in 1929. And you couldn't get into the cave then. It was closed for the Jews. There was no, but he came to the city, and there's a wall there that they say, by tradition from the Arizal, I think, from Rabbi Isaac Luria, who was there, and he identified the wall of the building that's closest to the patriarchs and matriarchs. And I have pictures of that too. And the previous Rebbe went up those steps and prayed there and so on. Mamish 2 days later, I think it was 2 days later, or a week later, was the terrible massacre that happened in 1929, Tarpat. The famous massacre of the Jews of Hebron. 67 Jews were butchered alive. The worst massacre in Israel. Now we have, unfortunately, October 7th, but I think that was the worst massacre of Jews in Israel ever that we have recorded history, I think. I mean, I'm talking about post-destruction of the temple, But it was a terrible, and certainly in the 20th century, that was the worst massacre. And it came out of nowhere. It was unexpected. There were very religious Jews there. And it was a terrible thing. And till today, it's one of those, tragic. 1960, 1970s, somewhere in the middle of the 1970s, some beautiful stories of how they settled, how they brought back Jews to the city of Hebron. The government didn't want to bring Jews back to Hebron as a permanent thing. But there were a group of ladies. This is an incredible thing what happened over there. This is also all told. It's all could be found. It's a fascinating story. A group of, maybe you know the story, but 20 women climbed through a window in the Beit Hadassah. There's a house there a building called Beit Hadassah on the main street of Hebron, the Jewish quarter, and there was no Jews there. And they parked in that house. They were there for 8 months, I believe, without their husbands. The government didn't let them in. If you go out, you couldn't get back in, obviously. They were hoping they would come back. They made it impossible for them, hoping that, they'll give up and they'll leave and that'll be it. These women stuck it out, and they stayed there 8-9 months without their husbands. Food was sent in once a day so that they have food. Obviously, the government's not going to let them starve, so they sent in food. Unfortunately, there was one child that died in the building because the mothers went in there with their children. So the Nachshon is, I think his name is Baruch Nachshon. He's a famous artist. His son, the baby, died there. So the mother brought her out, holding the baby, and brought her to a cemetery in Hebron, the old Jewish cemetery. And once that happened, and I think that the government buckled and allowed them to stay, and that's when they built homes and a settlement over there. And today you have about 400 families that live in Hebron, right? About 400 families, 400 Jews? I don't remember exactly. But there's 400, it's either families or Jews, I can't remember, that live in 2 sections of the city. And it's very interesting. These Jews, they live with their doors open. They don't close their doors, no bars on the nothing. They have no fear whatsoever. It's unbelievable. It's in fact, the Arabs are scared of them. It's one of those very interesting things. But they live there. But there were some tragedies. They bought that with blood. It was like Avram paid, they paid. And it was a very hard, thing to accomplish. But today, Hebron is visited by tens of thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of Jews a year. It's a huge place of tourist attraction. And the Shabbos, this coming Shabbos, by the way, when they talk about the purchase of Hebron, there's going to be mistama 5,000-10,000 Jews come for Shabbos to Hebron, if not more. They make a massive thing. Avram, you ever been there? It's like a big deal. Shabbos Chaye is like the Shabbos of Hebron. Thousands and thousands of people descend on Hebron. They have a beautiful Shabbos there, and meals, and Chabad is very involved. There's a Chabad house in Hebron. There's a Chabad shliach there. That he's mainly there to take care of all the soldiers that are there. There's so many. So he takes care of them, and he, fill in, and mitzvah, whatever. But Hebron is a very interesting place. People are scared to go there because it's the territories and it's an Arab city and all that. So, you can take, there's buses that go there and they're protected. They're, bulletproof and everything. But there's very little incident there. There really is. It's not, it's one of those places that there's the least problems are in Hebron from all the, but anyway, that's the story. And, you have any other questions? Yeah.
Torah buried in there?
No, of course not. No.
Online it says there's controversy whether she was buried there or not.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I looked that up. Where does it say that?
It just said,
Online?
Online it says Abraham. The Bible does not state where Keturah is buried. The tradition suggests that she may be buried with her husband in the cave.
It says clear that Avram was buried together with Sarah.
Right, it says that.
Yeah.
But it's not clear as to what happened.
So I would have to look that up to see. I don't remember that.
Is Avram considered her husband?
Well, if she's considered his concubine, then I'm not sure what the husband is considered.
It doesn't say that since she proceeded to take a wife.
Yeah. But then right after it says concubine.
It says 800 Jews live in Hebron.
Oh, 800. Okay.
It's, it's 2023, the end of 2023.
I don't think it's growing. I don't think the government's allowing it to grow. That politics. No. Anyway, thank you all for coming. We'll see you next week again, and enjoy. Yes, I need, ladies and gentlemen,